welcome to the Sexient Being Sessions. Today we are talking about reclamation, healing after narcissistic abuse. I'm Alix Pruett, a certified sex, love, and relationship coach with a focus on BDSM and kink. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to transform their old patterns, pain, and beliefs so they can create thriving relationships that are deeply connected, playful, and fulfilling within themselves and others. Today, I'm joined by the phenomenal Rachelrose. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes. Hi, I am Rachelrose, a life coach with a master's degree in psychology that specializes in PTSD and trauma. My focus is helping women heal from narcissistic abuse and thrive in all aspects of life afterwards. My mission is to empower women who have experienced various forms of trauma to discover inner peace, cultivate self-love, and embrace happiness. And together we embark on a transformative journey towards healing, resilience, and a fulfilling life. Hand in hand, we create an empowering path to growth through self-discovery and walking on this empowering path together, unlocking our true potentials and embracing a fulfilling life.
Beautiful. So I'm going to let you take the lead on this one since the healing after narcissistic abuse was your brainchild.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. What I encounter most of the time is the absolute roadblock of knowing what to do after experiencing narcissistic abuse in order to heal from it. A lot of times, it first takes knowledge and understanding, and then acceptance. We, especially when undergoing the abuse in the moment, tend to reshape our beliefs in a way that doesn't create negativity within us. So, we're in a lot of denial of what's going on, and then the aftermath of what, when you leave and you're separated, no contact, whatever that may look like for you. The beginning parts of that is a lot of self-deprecation. And it's difficult to go from that self-deprecation to an actual healing path and knowing what to do. I encounter so many women who are finally at this acceptance place, but they have no idea where to go from there.
Yeah, and I've actually very actively been helping a friend who is going through a situation where the narcissistic abuse from the other side is almost glaring. It's hard to look at, right? It's just like, wow, like I remember my own experiences with this, but parts of me have like blocked that out a little bit, right?
Yes.
Because I still have to function with this person in some capacity in my world. But
Yeah.
the levels of high projection from the narcissistic side is it is hard to stomach at
Yeah.
times. And I think in this like container of me helping my friend, one of the most valuable things that I kept bringing her back to over and over again is like, your needs matter. Like, your experiences are valid. And our main focus to start is to get you to a place of safety within your own nervous system. Like, first and foremost, that is the highest priority, because whether it is the chaotic explosion towards the end of the relationship or like you're still in it, like your body is in a type of trauma response.
Yeah. And on top of that trauma response, narcissistic abuse specifically, studies have shown functions very similarly to addiction.
Mhm.
So it's, one thing to leave. It's a whole nother thing to not feel the withdrawals. Like, oh, I love this person, I want to go back.
Mhm.
And that's completely normal because of the chemical firings that have now been created or happened in your brain that function the same as addiction. When you are in a, let's say, unhealthy relationship with alcohol or narcotics, when you stop taking them, and unfortunately, cold turkey is the best example in this situation. You've gone no contact with your abuser. You're gonna have withdrawals, and they're gonna show up similarly that they do with alcohol or narcotic addiction. You're gonna feel, you know, panic attacks. You could get sick physically.
Mhm.
And on top of that, all of the emotional irregularity that's going to be happening because your body and your mind have this belief that this person is this safety, this like amazing thing, this fantasy you've built in your head, which is where this addiction has come from. And so breaking free from that is difficult in and of itself.
Well, I think in my own experience and even what I got to see my friend working through, right,
Hmm.
was even though she was recognizing I need space from this,
Hmm.
right? Because she had it resonate really highly, like, no, I need to come back to this like space of safety in my feeling because everything feels crazy right
Hmm.
now. Everything feels chaotic, nothing feels safe.
Hmm.
Is the the other partner in this situation, even though she was very like clearly stating a boundary,
Hmm.
was not respecting that boundary at all.
Hmm.
They kept contacting, they kept texting,
Yeah.
and it was I was watching the cycles and I was like, "Oh, this is fascinating," because I'm literally getting to watch him move through all the different like tiers of fear response.
Yes.
And that's the like trauma response as well, and that's the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so that can look like all of a sudden being really aggressive, lashing out,
Hmm.
blaming, yelling, um, being like, "Well, I'm gonna leave this place," right? That's
Hmm.
the flight,
Yeah.
and then you moving into the freeze and like more fawny aspects of that, the pleading and begging,
Hmm.
right? And she had a really hard time not wanting to soothe that, not wanting to help
Yeah.
that person
Yeah.
feel better.
Yeah.
And I was like, but what is like we kept coming back to what is your number one priority and responsibility right now? It is putting
Hmm.
your own oxygen mask on first. Your
Hmm.
mental health is number one. You having safety in your own system is number one because if you can't do that, you can't actually help anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah, the image that came to my brain is it's a lot like I'll go with Karens here. Karens who are upset because they have lost control of what they feel entitled to in, let's go with like a store or coffee shop or whatever. And
Mhm.
they're yelling at the employee demanding for a manager because they have lost their control, their grip over the situation that they feel entitled to, which they, in reality, we're not entitled to anything. We deserve a lot of things. It doesn't mean we're going to get what we deserve because that's just not how life works. But it's a very similar dynamic. And
Mhm.
a lot of the time, there's this saying, the customer is always right. And so employees want to cater to the customer, even if they're being a complete dipshit. Um, and that is a mentality that has been, conditioned in us. So it's very common to want to ease that other person's suffering from their lack of control.
Mhm.
And they are experiencing trauma. like you said, it's a trauma response for them, but their trauma is coming from a different place. It's
Mhm.
coming from they felt like the ruler of their own nation and you were their, in chains subject or slave, for lack of a better word. And you're now rebelling and revolting against them. And that's
Yes.
pissing them off.
Well, and so to me, that's even where we'll take the extremes of, because to me the like fight and fawn responses are
Mhm.
more of that like polarity that shows
Yeah.
up in the trauma response, or the like more primal freeze or like fear responses that show
Hmm.
up in behaviors. And what I got to actually like witness through this dynamic with my friend and the partner she's leaving
Hmm.
is that a lot of his like communication was like, well, my needs matter too. You need to come back to make me feel better.
Hmm.
And then on the opposite side of that, so it's for that fight side, which I'm going to
Hmm.
say is more of the narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah.
It's the projection out that something external to you is going to be the thing that fixes, soothes that, like
Hmm.
that you personally have no control over that, that you only
Yeah.
have this feigned control over another person, which we only have control over ourselves.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Um, but then the person on the opposite side of that is internalizing it and
Hmm.
saying like they're not as valuable, that the other person's needs matter more,
Hmm.
and that they're less than.
Hmm.
And that like it's that duality and imbalance between those extremes that then leads to those very both sides are like trying to control each other in a way, right? But one is very like externally projected on you need to fix me, and the other one is the external projection of I can make this better if I just give them what they want.
Yes. Which, narcissists target empaths and people pleasers, strong people in general for that reason.
Mhm.
Is they know that it's in our nature to be a caregiver, to help, to want to make
Mhm.
sure that that person is okay.
Yeah.
And so, if you are a victim of a narcissist and any abuse through that, at least take solace in the fact that they only target strong individuals who are extremely caring.
Mhm. Well, and I would say to me, for the more empathic side of
Hmm.
it, right? And it was not a it was a simple realization. Again, simple's not easy, right? As I
Oh
keep
no.
saying.
Yeah.
Um, it was that like I am really good. Like there are still times I am really good at being very, very strong for all
Hmm.
the people around me, right?
Hmm.
And continuing to show up for them time and time again. But when it came down to it, when it came to actually being strong just for myself, for standing up for myself, when
Hmm.
I was experiencing abusive behavior from a partner,
Hmm.
I had a really hard time stepping into that being okay. So to me, there was a weakness in my system that I didn't see, that like I also deserved to have the strength that I was trying to give to others.
Yeah. And it's baffling to me. I'm speaking for my personal self. How as a life coach, I have people coming at me for advice and whatnots all the time, and they're just like, I'm struggling with this, and I'm like, oh, here's a great suggestion or solution
Mhm.
for you. And then when crazy things happen to me, I'm like, what do I do? And then I start laughing, and I'm like, well, what would I say to someone else?
Mhm.
Because it's so easy. as an empathic person, and people like us who care to help others, we're self-sacrificing in that sense,
Mhm.
that we forget that we have that capability to give to ourselves too.
Yeah. Well,
And
and there can also be the like, for me, there was underlying narratives
mhm.
that it like, that I wasn't even worthy of giving those things to myself.
Yeah, oh
That
yeah.
literally other people just were more worthy and deserving of those things than I was. Like, I wasn't even a consideration in my own world for what my needs were, or that my experience was
Mhm.
valid, or that my intuition was valid. Like, I had
Mhm.
so many cutoffs in that
Oh yeah,
space.
yeah.
Um,
And it's a trauma response
mhm.
to the abuse that you were receiving from this person, proverbial. And
Yeah, and
when
it for me, it was a long line. Like, it
oh
led
yeah,
back
anyone, yeah,
through my
childhood.
entire life
Mhm. Mhm.
for where that conditioning initially started.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I hear a lot of women that I work with saying, like, I didn't deserve this. I'm a good person. And it's almost like they're trying to convince themselves
Mhm.
of how much they're worthy, because there's just no way that they could believe it. And so they're projecting that out to me for validation and reassurance. And that's
Mhm.
great. I'm here. I will give you validation and reassurance. But the
Yeah.
sad truth of it is, it does not matter how I could literally scream at the top of my lungs until my dying day for
Mhm.
one specific person about, how worthy they are, how valid they are, and give them that.
Mhm.
And it could still go in one ear and out the other, or bounce
Yeah.
off of them. Because if we're not able to say this to ourselves and believe it, we won't hear it from others. It's like I struggled with a lot of body dysmorphia, and it does not matter how many times another
Mhm.
person calls me beautiful. I
Oh, yeah.
don't believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is all inner work that sadly,
Hmm.
like, it's based off those projections of the world around us throughout
Hmm.
our lives that
Yeah.
sets those things, right?
Hmm.
But in that, like, we're the ones who get to take our own ownership of being like, "Oh, that's not the reality I have to live in." Like, I mean, if you're gonna be delusional anyway, right?
Hmm.
Because in body dysmorphia, you are delusional. It's like looking
Yeah.
in the funhouse mirrors at
Yeah.
yourself,
Oh yeah. And nobody
right?
wants to be called delusional.
No, but I'm just saying, if you're gonna be delusional anyway,
Yeah.
if you're gonna be crazy anyway,
Hmm.
just fucking love the shit you have and own it, because
Yes.
it's serving the fuck out of you.
Yeah.
And like, even your own past toxic behaviors,
Hmm.
they were doing things to try to serve you the best way they knew how,
Yes.
because of the information base they had, because of the experiences they had that
Hmm.
told them, oh, if I behave this way, it's not safe. I'm not safe.
Hmm.
But when you can connect with that from this more, like, we'll call it the higher self, your divine alignment, your inner goddess, your inner god, whatever you want to call it, right?
Hmm.
When you can connect from it there, you can see how much of a choice you have had
Hmm.
over, like, the spans of your entire life. And like, yes, where you made choices to continually put other people first, but now you can realize, I don't have to keep doing that. Like,
Yes.
I'm not better than they are,
Yes.
but I'm equal. Like, I
Hmm.
have equal grounds.
Hmm. And that is a whole process in and of itself. And unfortunately, it's extremely difficult and extremely time consuming to do it on your own, which is why seeking out people who know how to speed up that process and help you through
Hmm.
it is so imperative,
Yeah.
because a lot of that is reshaping your own narrative of who you are. And that is diving in deep. And the deeper you go, the harder it is to hold your breath. And the scarier it is that you're going to drown.
Mhm.
And so
And I
yeah,
oh, no, finish what you were saying, go ahead.
I was just
Sorry.
going to say that having support there and someone who actually knows what to do. It's not a obstacle of
Mhm.
I don't know where to start. They know where to start.
Mhm.
Is so helpful.
Well, and, like, so this specific instance with this friend, like, she knows some of my past history,
Mhm.
but not all of it, because obviously no one's gonna know all of it, right?
Mhm.
But she was actually at a point when she reached out to me where she didn't think I wanted to talk to her.
Mhm.
I clarified and I was like, "Please never make the assumption I don't wanna talk to you. If I tell you I need a break, cool." Right? But
Yeah.
don't make assumptions on my behalf because, like, it wasn't accurate. Um, but, like, in that space, for whatever reason, she felt drawn to call out to me. And, like, I had to set a distinct container for myself, being like, it's gonna be real easy for me to step into the coaching role. Like, I know I'm gonna, like, hold certain spaces for her that I hold as a coach,
Mhm.
not as a friend,
Yeah.
right? Because I value my time as a coach and a friend, but they are two different ways of
Yeah.
showing up for a person.
Oh yeah.
And the piece I found really interesting and I want to like point out here is one, or I guess there's a couple pieces. Sorry. Um, one is like if you are feeling called to certain content, right? Especially around healing
Mhm.
and especially like coming out of these sorts of relationships, like there's probably something valuable in it. If there's a certain person, even if you feel like they may not want to talk to you, but like you feel like that person is like really going to have something that like could be helpful for you,
Mhm.
reach out to them
Mhm.
because if she hadn't, right? There's a very good possibility that like she wouldn't have had
Yeah.
the grounding space she has. Like I have a lot of training personally around being trauma informed, dealing with these sorts of relationship dynamics because I've also done so much of my own healing in that space.
Yeah.
But like there was a point and I was like, look, like you have amazing supports
Mhm.
through this. Like you, for whatever reason, you felt called to reach out to me and my partner, and him and I are both phenomenal at being able to work through this space and help other people through this space.
Mhm.
And I was like, I wish that your ex partner, well, now soon to be ex partner, right, um, had that same support.
Yeah.
And like, it's very likely he does. But what I was getting to witness from the other side was people who were just feeding into his narrative
Mhm.
of like, he has no accountability, none of this is his responsibility, like, versus taking his own ownership,
Mhm.
versus being like, hey, just maybe give her her space,
Mhm.
right? Maybe like showing that you can respect that she's telling you exactly what she needs.
Mhm.
Like, is exactly the thing that, like, yeah, it feels like this huge separation right now, but maybe it's the thing that'll actually bring you guys back together.
Yeah. And I like what you were saying about, there's friend you and there's coach you.
Mhm.
Because I have to separate them,
Mhm.
or
Yes.
there's no sustainability for me. Because coach me is all knowing. That's the avatar I've created for that, so that I can be that place for people. And I've done a lot of training for that, obviously. And
Mhm.
friend me is supportive, but absolutely knows nothing.
Mhm.
I can just be support. So a lot of healing is also taking ownership in yourself of first, processing all of this. And that's something that you do on your own, and then seeking out friendship support. And then the third tier of that is seeking out professional support.
Mhm.
And a lot of people stop at the friendship support, thinking that having an ear from someone who has no idea how to help you, other than I'm here for you, let's get dinner and you won't have to be alone, is enough. And the sad truth of it is it's usually not. I'm not going to say it always isn't. It's usually not. And it can be enough, but it could take you until you're 80 years old.
Mhm.
And so there's ownership within that part of the opposite side as well in your healing. This is owning to your nose, owning to reaching out to a friend, and then owning to seeking help professionally.
Mhm.
And then also owning to the certain sacrifices that you're going to have to make along the way in order to reach that peace and stability and healing that you're looking for.
And I do wanna say, because I did also find this very important during the last few week period of this happening, right?
Mhm.
For anyone supporting a friend or family member coming out of a narcissistic abuse
Mhm.
relationship, like, and I guess this for me is and I try to bring this to my friendships as well as best I can, but like when I'm in friend, I bring in more of my opinion about what the person would or like should do, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I recognize that in
Mhm.
myself. When I am in my coaching role, it is you are the only person who can make the best choice
Yes.
for you, but let's get some clarity around what those different pathways look like.
Mhm.
And I explained this to my friends as well through this. I was like, you could very well make the choice that like you are totally willing to step back into this relationship without him needing to shift, take responsibility or anything else.
Oh yeah.
You can make the choice that I want to go back to that. I am okay with making sure that like he is put first and just surrender to that experience. There's also like there was the possibility that maybe he did start to shift in his communication with her
Mhm.
to like meet her at a point where she is actually being treated as an equal. Her
Mhm.
boundaries, her needs are also being respected. And their relationship could have manifested and been like, even through this point of chaos, been this really beautiful healing space together.
Mhm. Emphasize
And
that
then,
word together. It's
yeah,
not one-sided, it's two people. If you enter back into it, sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you.
Oh, you're
You
okay.
enter
It's
back
a
into
two-way
it,
street.
they're working too. Yeah,
Yeah.
two-way street, exactly.
Yeah. And that's to me, relationships are two-way streets. They can be very like one-way streets. That totally happens. And to me, that is the like epitome of a narcissistic relationship
Yeah.
as well. But in that, there's also like, okay, there's also this path of like, you want to leave the relationship.
Mhm.
And here is like some of the backlash you may very likely deal with. But that space is no longer about you having to prioritize the other person over you, and you're prioritizing yourself fully. And that's okay too. Like, there's nothing wrong with any of those paths, but let's come to a place of safety in your nervous system so you can make a choice moving forward
Mhm.
rather than it being from a fear response, which is a reaction.
Mhm.
So again, it's back to it's to me, it's you're coming to that place of safety. You're moving out of the activated fear response, which I'm
Mhm.
going to tell anyone, like getting yourself to what feels like a safe space in your surroundings is highly important about that. Like literally if the person is on the other side of the door banging and screaming on it, you're going to stay triggered in your nervous system.
Yeah.
You're in an activated fear response. If your phone's sitting in front of you and they're constantly calling it, text messaging, you're constantly checking on their social media,
Yeah.
because I'm going to tell you, if they're a narcissist, it is
They
a
will
likely
be
possibility
hoovering.
they will
Mhm.
be spewing all their crap all over social media. It
Targeting
says
you. Oh, yeah.
it says way more about them than it ever says
Ever.
about you, and people who are intelligent will recognize this. People who are not, or like people who are emotionally intelligent, relationally intelligent, will recognize that and be like, "Oh, I feel bad for the other side of this," especially if you aren't engaging in the exact same ways,
Mhm.
right? If you're like, "My business doesn't need to be all over social media," like there can be high levels of blaming and like very direct blaming. You are making this happen.
Yeah. And
And
sorry.
oh yeah, it's again, it's a two-way street. Like both parties have their 100% responsibility
Yeah.
for that relationship, and like you a person deciding to step away or stay is only their choice. And that's my coaching side, but it's okay, here are the different paths and how those could look.
Mhm. I also want to touch on when a narcissist, specifically a narcissist, does target you like this, messages, calls, wiping the floor with you on social media, it is a weaponization attack at you to reel you back in. And it makes it all the more harder because of all the flying monkeys that are going to flock to this person in agreement. They haven't
Mhm.
seen the mask hasn't come off for them. And even if it does, they might be in denial of it too. They could be a victim of their wrath as well. But it makes it so much harder not to retaliate. There's
Mhm.
so many times that, they'll post just the worst things about you on social media, and then your closest friends or people that you thought were on your side are like, "Oh my god, you're right." And then they're messaging you now saying like, "Why aren't you he's being so understanding. Like why are you doing this to him or her?" Sorry, I
And
specified
they
gender.
will reach out
Mhm.
to so many people. Like if they think
Oh yeah.
that another person possibly has contact with you,
Mhm.
they will reach out to those people to try to get them on their side.
Yes. It's a
And that,
weaponization.
yeah,
Mhm.
and that was a really big difference I had to realize when I was going through my own shit with
Mhm.
my very narcissistic relationship. And the end of that is I kept getting it thrown back at me because
Mhm.
my ex-partner actually lost some of his closest friendships through this
Mhm.
process as well, because they saw him repeating a behavior that they're like, "No, like, why are you treating another person this way? We don't like that. We don't want to be
Mhm.
friends with you anymore."
Yeah.
Like, it didn't specifically have anything to do with me. It
Yeah.
probably didn't
Yeah.
help in his mind because now these people are like
They're
friends with
taking
me,
your
and
side.
I'm
How dare
yeah,
you?
and I'm I'm like actively telling them like, you're welcome to still be friends with him. Like,
Yeah.
just please don't share information about my life because I don't need that trying to be weaponized back for little tidbits he's hearing, because that happened as well.
Mhm. And
And in that, those people clarified, like, we love you, but like we're just done with his shit. Like it's not we're not choosing you because of this. It's just like you are the higher value friend to us, and like the way you're showing up.
mhm. And I want to point out that, like, even if you're able to get past this stage of healing after narcissistic abuse, if you can go, if you, well, I don't know how to phrase this great, but once you're past, you've cut them off. You're able to. You've
Mhm.
lasted. You've changed all your social medias, your phone number, whatever you have to do to go no contact with this person. The second tier is, and it's not always the case, but it certainly was in mine, was all of the victimizations that I got from family and friends.
Mhm.
They weren't denying that he was a horrible, abusive, narcissistic human, but if only I had just not married him, this wouldn't have happened to me. If I had just done this or that, they were victim shaming me.
Mhm.
And that is a big part that happens after you're able to go no contact.
Yeah.
And it's coming from well-meaning people. They're not trying to victim shame. They think that what they're saying is helpful. And that's a
Mhm.
good emphasis on what you were saying earlier about how you give your opinion a lot more as a friend than as a
Mhm.
coach. Is these they were giving me their opinions. Their opinions were just really shitty.
Yeah, and that's, like,
Not to
even
say yours were.
no, and that's, like, even in my situation, like, with my ex-husband, I don't wanna keep referring to my friend because, she's just been a very strong mirror of being like, "Oh, yeah, like, I have healed through all these spaces, like, I can help other
Mhm.
people really well through these spaces,"
Mhm.
and how do I talk to a person who's at this space right
Mhm.
now? Which is kinda funny because this happened before this call ever was or this call was scheduled way before that
All of this
situation
happened, yeah.
even came up, right?
Mhm.
Um, but, like, in my own experience, I had all these people around me when I was still in my, like, uh, choice point of, like,
Mhm.
do I file for divorce or do I give it time and see how it shifts if the relationship can come back together? And I
Mhm.
had all the people around me being like, "You need to file for divorce.
Oh,
You
yeah.
need," and, like, I had people scream at me
Mhm.
because their belief so strongly that this is the path I needed to take.
Mhm.
And in those instances, like, I just watched because even at that time, like, I was actively watching them be triggered. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, this is also a lot more about them than it is about me for the way they're reacting.
Mhm.
But in that, I was able for myself to take the stand of like, this is a choice I need to make, and I will make that when I'm ready. Right
Yes.
now, I'm not.
Yes.
And that can be really, really hard, especially when it comes to
Oh, yeah.
very like family connections,
Mhm.
right? When it comes to very close friendships. And for me, like, those are the places, like, my family connections starts in childhood, right? Are the
Mhm.
places that I started to learn that, like, me making my own choice was not, like, okay or safe, and, like, other people's needs mattered more.
Yeah. Well,
Because, like, I would be wanting
mhm.
to do something and at that choice point in myself, and then somebody else would jump in with their opinions telling me, "No,
Mhm.
this is what you need to do. This is what you have to do."
Yeah.
And my needs for that exploration became invalid.
Oh, yeah. And it doesn't always have to look just like that. In my case,
Mhm.
they weren't giving their opinions on what I should do. They were only telling me like, "Well, you have to live with the consequences of your choices or your
Yeah.
actions." And that was
Yeah.
it. It was just like more victim shaming.
Well, and that's for mine, it was, oh, it just escaped me. Crap.
Oh, darn.
I got caught up on the consequences of victim shaming for a second.
It's understandable. I do want to touch on what you
Yeah, go
mentioned
on.
about divorce.
Mhm.
I am still married legally to my partner, my ex narcissistic abuser. And I had the convenience that he is not targeting me through our marriage certificate,
Mhm.
which would probably spur me a little bit faster to deal with my divorce.
Yeah.
But Every single time that I have been like, okay, I'm good, I can deal with this now, I have panic attacks or mental breakdowns, and
Mhm.
it's very traumatizing. And
Yeah.
so it does not matter when you choose to get divorced. I could be
Mhm.
50, 60, I could be on my deathbed and be like, all right, I'm ready for divorce. It really
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It's a piece of paper. And as long as they're not weaponizing that piece of paper against you, which they can,
Mhm.
because, that's a contract that joints a lot of your lives together, it's not necessary and can
Mhm.
further traumatize you when people are saying, you need to get divorced immediately.
Yeah.
And I've had people doing that, and I felt the pressure. And for
Mhm.
the first year that I was healing from all of this, I kept hearing from people, you need to do it, you need to do it, you need to do it. If you don't do it, bad things are going to happen. And so I was feeling that
Mhm.
weight of those proverbial bad things happening to me, that I created bad things that happened to me because I couldn't handle that. And it's okay to take
Mhm.
your time to deal with the certain legal things that you need to deal with. I need to heal emotionally before I can enter into that battle.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things. It's kind of that space to me of playing with your edge of where you are as well,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And how much you can take on without now just spiraling yourself off into trauma.
Hmm.
And now all over again getting yourself in like a freeze and fawn response. um
Oh, yeah.
but that's one of the things that in this situation with my friend, I was like, okay, like for you, what what is bad enough, right? That you're taking whatever action towards or away that you need to. And this came down to a story with my current partner. He ended up getting sick a couple summers ago, but it was like 100-degree days. He's outside for a lot of that time. And he got a hold of me on one of his breaks and was like, oh man, like I don't feel good. And I was like, okay, like asking about his symptoms and everything. And what he was describing, it sounded like heat exhaustion to me or like heat stroke. I was like, you may want to contact your boss. And he's like, yeah, I feel dizzy and all these things and nauseous. I was just like, uh, I was like, well, he's like, I'll contact my boss if it gets bad enough. And I asked him, I was like, what is bad enough?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And he's like, well, when I pass out. I was just like,
It's so American
dumb.
mindset. That's so ridiculous.
I was like, I was like, okay, like if that is what it takes, like why are you trying to send yourself to the hospital for it to be
Yeah.
bad enough? And he's like, "Oh, I think I'm gonna be sick. I need to go." And he like got off the phone, puked, and called me right back. He's like, "I need to call my boss." And I was like, "I think that's a good idea."
Hmm.
And I got there because he literally couldn't even drive himself home. And thankfully, I
No.
had the ability to go pick him up and
Okay.
drive
Yeah.
him. He was white as a ghost. I show up and he's like, "Oh, by the way, I realized I haven't been sweating." And I was like, "I love you, but you're an idiot."
Oh, I feel it.
Learn to take, learn that bad enough doesn't have to take this long,
Hmm.
right?
And the same goes
And
for, sorry.
well, but like through this whole thing, I like get him home, take care of him. Like I'm still thinking it is like heat stroke at this point.
Hmm.
Like make him take a cold shower, which was fun to play with my sadistic side because I just got to laugh at him knowing that he like wasn't getting hurt, even though it was a really uncomfortable situation. And I took the cold shower with him. So I was in
You
there
could laugh, but also you
potentially.
experienced.
Yes, exactly. And then the next day, he was still running a fever. And I was like, okay, like heat stroke and heat exhaustion, like you don't keep running a fever for this long. So I gave him a
No.
COVID test. And he had COVID. We literally spent the whole night together, all these things. But in that, like because he wasn't listening to his own signals
Mhm.
early enough, because his tolerance of what bad enough was so high,
Mhm.
he kept trying to sustain for a job that paid like 20 bucks an hour,
Yeah.
right? And maybe some people are like, "Oh, I'd kill for 20 bucks an hour." You know what? I don't care. I don't care if that job was $1,000 an hour. To me, that is not worth a person's life.
No, and on top of that, those bosses who are paying you that money would replace you in a second when you die.
Mhm. Well, and then, like, and bringing it back around to this situation, right? With my friend, I was just like, "Okay, like, what is bad enough?"
Mhm.
And just giving yourself that point of reflection of, like, how much do you think, how much discomfort, how much pain, how much nausea, how much contraction and restriction and all the things in your system
Mhm.
do you have to stay with before it's bad enough that you're like, I gotta do something different,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because this isn't working anymore.
Well, on top of that, like, and you're completely right. I'm not saying that. I'm
Hmm.
just branching out. Um,
Yeah.
when you leave your abuser, so many times you're like, okay, I'm good now
Hmm.
because that was your capacity, that was your enough, and now that you're not at your enough anymore, you've tipped over the cup and let a few drops out, so it's not overflowing anymore. But at any point, if those two drops were to come back, it would. But
Hmm.
now that you've taken those two drops out, we tell ourselves, okay, I'm good now. I don't need to continue working on this. I can move on. And we don't realize that those two drops can come from anything. It could be, like your partner getting sick. It could be
Hmm.
that those two drops of just getting a cold that overflow your cup and you're like, I just have the sniffles. Like, why am I freaking out like this? Why am I convulsing? Why am I having panic attacks?
Hmm.
Because the process is not knowing how much you can take. It's emptying your cup so that you have room to take.
Hmm. Well, and the other piece I wanted to touch on around the
Mhm.
when is it enough, right?
Oh, yeah.
Was there's, I guess, once again, there's two things. So one is, one thing I did try to make very clear with my friend
Mhm.
is based on the behaviors that I was seeing come across from the partner.
Mhm.
He still feels like on some level he has control.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, look, like, you've been getting people telling you they think it's a good idea that, like, if you go back to that house, that you have a police escort.
Mhm.
And, like, now that I'm actually, like, getting to, like, see some of what's coming up, I actually agree.
Mhm.
Because right now, when there's those feelings of control from the narcissist over the world, over you, the
Mhm.
world outside them, like, they still, like, they're acting in terrible ways,
Oh, yeah.
right? And really harmful ways. In that they haven't actually reached their breaking point. Their breaking point is the
Not
point
yet.
that
Yep.
they no longer, like, they have no control. They have that realization.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, that, like, where I'm noticing that with this situation is probably the point of her filing for divorce, because she has told him,
Something similar. Yeah.
this is what I'm going to do. And he's still not actually believing her.
Mhm. Well,
So
there
it
yeah.
probably won't come down until that actually happens, and he still may not even believe it fully
Oh, yeah. No, he's in delusion
after it,
too. Yeah.
yeah, after those actions happen, and that is his path to work through. Like, she does not have to support him in that. She does not keep
Mhm.
I've told her, I was like, you have very clearly and concisely told him where you're at,
Mhm.
and very directly being like, This is where I am. Like, my mental health is number one. Like, when these actions show up where I've asked for space and you have not been able to give me that space,
Hmm.
you keep contacting, keep trying to reach out. And thankfully, she had not been engaging, right?
Good. Yeah.
Like, I feel scared, which can be hard to admit, right?
Oh, yeah.
But like, now this is me taking a step further away because this isn't safe for me, is ultimately what it breaks down to.
Hmm.
And but I'm like, he still feels those tugs of control
Yeah.
in this situation. And you don't know what another person's actual breaking point
Yeah.
is,
Capabilities are.
what that outlash is.
No.
So
Yeah.
like, if anything, like, do a little bit more due diligence than you think may be necessary, because maybe they never hit you
Exactly. Yeah.
in the relationship, but that doesn't mean it's not something they are capable of, especially if you've seen them get angry and like hit walls
Oh, yeah.
or just go like hit other things, do things that are self-harming.
Yeah.
Um Once again, because they haven't actually reached that breaking point. And some people, maybe they only reach that extreme of a breaking point once, but that is drastic enough that it could unlife a person.
Yep.
And so like,
Yeah.
I don't say those words to try to scare anyone. It's
No.
bringing an awareness about when somebody's primal system is in a high activated state and they don't know how to regulate out of that back into safety.
Hmm.
You never really know how that person will respond.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I want to, I love the word delusion that you used earlier.
Mhm.
And as, as probably irking as it is probably going to sound to other people, both parties are in a delusion.
Mhm.
If that person, the abuser, has not gotten to that yet, they've never hit me, it's okay, like I don't need the police escort. That's a delusion
Mhm.
you're convincing yourself of. It's like, I have not done enough heroin that has killed me yet.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean it can't. And I'm building up my tolerances. And then on top of that, there are so many cases where a person, let's go with heroin, has been addicted for years. They built up such a huge tolerance that they needed so much just to get that high that they were looking for. And then they're clean for 3 years. And then they go back and they do the same amount that they were used to and they OD and they die. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be 3 years. It could be the 3 days that you left the house and now you're going back.
Yeah.
And that you have had the time to purge yourself of a lot of the things that were happening. You calmed yourself, you regulated yourself, you healed a little bit. And so you're not at the place that was able to tolerate the same abuse that was happening. And
Mhm.
the flip side is that person that you left, they are now more potent.
Mhm.
Their capability of that yet is more potent. So you coming into that could be dangerous.
Yeah.
And I'm, like you said, I don't want to scare people, but proceed with caution.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was the second thing I really wanted to touch on. So towards the end of my marriage, which for me was that like 10 times mirror of
Hmm.
toxic behaviors from me and like other people in my life, but reflected all in this one space.
Hmm.
Thankfully, like that relationship never got to physical abuse, but there was a point in time where my partner had been out of the house for a while.
Hmm.
And when he came back in, like I hadn't done any of that healing work. Like my system was in such a state of shock still, and like very much so in its freeze and fawn responses. But when he came back in, there was like his sister had been staying with us, and she the very first day, she saw how he was talking to me, and she kind of snapped at him, and she's like, "How you're talking to her is not okay," and called him out.
Mhm.
And literally in my system, like, she may have used the word abusive at that point. If not, it was literally the next day when he took a very similar action,
Mhm.
um, in the way he was talking to me and talking down to me.
Mhm.
But she ended up using the word abusive at some point in time. And I remember being like, oh, her tolerance of abuse is just really, really low, like for how she gauges that.
Yeah,
I realized my tolerance of what I considered abusive was actually really, really high.
exactly. Yep.
And that's like, if somebody else is reflecting that, like, and especially like if it is a friend or another family member that, like, that they don't have ulterior motives, right? That
Mhm.
they are genuinely somebody who cares about you,
Yeah.
is reflecting that, like, there may be abuses going on in your relationship. They don't like the way your partner is treating you.
Mhm.
Like, there's probably something there that you have learned to kind of put the blinders onto,
Yeah.
and where your tolerance is much higher.
Mhm. And tolerance to anything does not mean it won't kill you. You can have a
No,
high tolerance to alcohol. It does not mean you'll never die of alcohol poisoning.
I mean, it very likely means that, like, if you continue using alcohol over your life,
That
it's
too,
going
that
to end up
too.
killing you,
You'll
right?
end up, your liver will start failing or something.
Yeah,
It'll
you get
lead to,
cirrhosis of the liver, you'll get
mhm, or
there's all
it
sorts of
could
things.
create a cancer within you
Mhm.
that kills you. That's not the actual thing that killed you. It's a byproduct that was created from that.
Mhm. Well, and to me, like, the point of the name of this episode, right, is we're talking about all these very dark, heavy, painful spaces. Like, when you start coming out of this, when you can actually build that safety, like coming back to a core of safety in yourself,
Mhm.
right? That you can actually make your own choices, that your needs matter,
Mhm.
right? That your experience is valid.
Mhm.
When you can come into self love and start moving towards that, realizing you are valuable, you are worthy.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, like, through those two actions of safety and self love, you start building self trust that
Mhm.
you can actually make these choices for yourself, and that other people's needs don't matter more,
Yeah.
right? But as you do that, it is a reclamation of your true self, your authentic self, your higher self, however you want to identify that.
Mhm.
And the more you start doing that, the more you do little bits of self care, right? Little bits of self love, little bits of, like, getting into the things you really enjoy and
Mhm.
want to be experiencing on a conscious level,
Mhm.
and moving into those things, then it is a reclamation of who you are at your core. And
Yes.
when you really embodying that, you receive love in a whole different way. One, you have, like, your own unconditional love you end up building within your system. But then on top of that, like, now you actually get to receive love in ways that are fulfilling, not pulling from you.
Mhm.
Because before, in that very empathic state, it is that your value, your worthiness, your lovability is based on the world around you, right?
Mhm.
And it's constantly pulling, you constantly are giving, giving, giving,
Mhm.
and receiving breadcrumbs
Yeah.
back in return to try to sustain you, and that's not sustaining for anyone.
Mm-mm.
But when you have that love, like, within yourself, can set healthy boundaries, learn how, like, what feels good for you, what's pleasurable for you, then, like, you actually start to to receive love in ways that are reciprocal, that give back as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. It's like I have always said to myself, why can't I, well, in the past, why can't I receive the same kind of love that I give out to the world?
Mhm.
And I feel like what you're saying is once you're able to do everything that Alix was just describing, that thought won't happen because there's more love coming into your life. And a lot of that starts within yourself.
Mhm.
Like, I remember realizing when I was saying that to myself in the past couple of years, why am I not getting the same love that I give to other people? And then I said, wait, I don't think I'm giving myself the same love that I give to other people.
Exactly.
And then I started giving myself that love. And
Mhm.
through that, I now have people in my lives and people who existed before who weren't giving them to me, like family members, who are now.
Mhm.
And I've built friendships and relationships with other people now who are giving me those things. It may not be exactly the same, but it's pretty darn close.
Well, and it's when you set healthy boundaries for yourself, right? And you know you're the one who's accountable for taking the action if that boundary is not respected, right? You are telling people exactly how to show you love. If you're saying, if I came to you and I was like, "Hey, Rachelrose, like we've been talking every day, like I gotta take a couple days for myself and just like self care. Like there's been a lot of like
Yeah.
stuff coming up for me." Like to me, like a good friend, somebody who genuinely loves you is gonna be like, "Yeah, fucking do you. Like, please
Mhm.
take care of you because I
Mhm.
love you and I want you to love you."
Oh, yeah. Ugh,
Right? Like that
beautiful. Oh,
exists in the world.
oh,
Like
yeah. And
those are
yeah.
those to me are the relationships that like light me the fuck up because I'm and it's where like
Yes.
consent and healthy boundaries, I'm like, it is sexy as fuck. Like,
Yes.
please do all those things. Like, you want me to drool over you, have the
Mhm.
healthiest boundaries and like be willing to ask for what you need and want.
Oh, yeah. Mwah. Yes. I feel like I do have to get going, but this is like the
Yes.
perfect ending. And especially since we're talking about reclamation here,
Yeah.
the first step, like, let's start loving ourselves, man.
Mhm.
I love this.
Yeah.
This is beautiful. Mm.
Yes. So do you have anything else you wanna say before we close out?
Not that won't lead us on a tangent.
Okay.
I think that was a beautiful ending, and thank you for that. That was beautiful. Mm.
Awesome. So and we will be back next Thursday at 1 PM Pacific Standard Time, and the topic next week is fracture, the impact of trauma.
Mhm.
So talking about the different ways that can actually create fractures from this authentic self. And
Yeah.
again, like, I mean, this all leads into each other of like the reclamation of self and getting to notice where those fracture points are because
Mhm.
trauma can be, I mean, it's scary, it can be overwhelming, like, it can be all these things. It can also be this amazing portal into this reclamation. So being
Beautiful.
willing to look through that lens.
Yes, I'm so
Um,
excited for that one. It's a great topic.
yes. And then the other part is if you are finding like yourself in these situations, right?
Mhm.
You can reach out to Rachel Rose. and myself. Our links are in the About section on YouTube. You will also find them under this video and the podcast. And
Mhm.
like, you can get support. And even if we aren't the like correct people for you to work with,
Mhm.
like, that can be a part of your path or information you share with other people,
Yeah,
right?
and even if you
To
just wanna
help
ask
them in
questions.
theirs.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I interrupted you. Even
Yeah.
if you just wanna ask questions too, like, it's not just reaching out to us to be like, "Yes, please be my coach." If you just have questions for us that you need a quick answer, that's always welcome too.
Mhm. Definitely. Like my whole thing is like I know I'm not everyone's perfect coach, but I am happy to like help them figure out whatever their next best steps are
Mhm.
to do that because I genuinely believe that every single person is worthy of having amazing and like fully thriving like intimate relationships and sexual experiences. Like that is my whole
Oh, yeah.
foundation. And I want to
100%.
help everybody take off their blinders to that.
100%. Oh, it's so beautiful. Well, I do have to get going. This has been a great conversation,
Yes.
and I look forward to our one next week.
Yes, I will talk to you then and we will see you all soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.